Picture this. A young woman, Tiffany Ann Cole, just 23 years old, finds herself at the center of a grisly crime that would shock the nation. This is not your usual tale of crime filled with dark alleyways and shadowy figures of the night. No, this is a story that begins in the heart of suburbia, in the homes of ordinary people, people like you and me. Tiffany Ann Cole, a name that would soon send chills down the spines of those who heard it. A name that would be etched into the annals of crime, forever linked with an act so horrifying that it shook the very core of a nation. But who was Tiffany? Just an average young woman, barely out of her teens, with the world at her feet and a future filled with promise. She was not born a criminal, she was not raised to be a monster. Yet she found herself embroiled in a crime that was anything but ordinary. The details of that gruesome act, the sheer horror of it, would slowly come to light, sending shockwaves through the community and beyond. The whispers started, the rumors swirled, and soon the world would know the name Tiffany Ann Cole. But the full extent of her crime, the absolute terror of it, is something we will delve into later. For now, let's take a step back. Let's try to understand how a young woman, with her whole life ahead of her, could find herself at the center of such a monstrous act. What could possibly drive someone to cross the line into darkness? Was it a sudden snap, a slow descent into madness, or perhaps something even more sinister? The answers to these questions are not easy, but they are necessary if we are to understand the chilling story of Tiffany Ann Cole. This is the chilling story of Tiffany Ann Cole, a young woman who would become synonymous with one of the most horrifying crimes in recent history. To understand this chilling tale, we must first travel back to Tiffany's early life. Tiffany Ann Cole was born in a picturesque small town, the kind you might see on a postcard. Her childhood, much like the town itself, seemed idyllic on the surface. Picture a young girl with a radiant smile, playing in the park, her laughter echoing through the quiet streets. A seemingly normal girl, living a seemingly normal life. She was raised in a loving home, her parents doing their utmost to provide for their only child. They were a tight-knit family, often seen at community gatherings, church picnics, and school events. Tiffany was a regular participant in school plays and was known for her knack for storytelling, a trait that would serve her in unexpected ways in the years to come. But if we look closer, we begin to see cracks in this perfect picture, like a piece of fine porcelain. It's only when you examine it closely that you see the tiny fractures, the early signs of the path Tiffany would eventually take. Her teachers noted a certain restlessness, a constant need for attention. The storytelling turned into exaggeration and then into outright lies. She would often be caught in these falsehoods but showed no remorse, no guilt. Instead, she seemed to thrive on the drama, the chaos that her fabrications would cause. Her parents, concerned, tried therapy, counseling, anything to help their daughter, but nothing seemed to work. Tiffany was spiraling and fast. The bright, bubbly girl they once knew was slowly being replaced by a stranger, someone they barely recognized. As she entered her teenage years, Tiffany's behavior only worsened. She was constantly in trouble at school, and her parents were at their wits' end. The once happy family was now a shell of its former self, their lives dominated by Tiffany's increasingly erratic behavior. But as we know, appearances can be deceiving, and Tiffany's life was about to take a dark turn. As Tiffany grew older, her life began to spiral out of control. A series of unfortunate events and life choices began to shape her path, steering her towards a life of crime. Tiffany's journey into the world of crime was not an overnight transition. It was a gradual process fueled by a potent mix of personal struggles and external influences. In each chapter of her life, we can see the signs of an impending catastrophe. As a teenager, Tiffany was introduced to a world of substance abuse and petty crimes. These experiences, while seemingly insignificant at the time, would later serve as stepping stones to her life of serious criminal activity. Her descent into this world was not just a personal choice, but a result of the environment in which she found herself. Her relationships played a significant role in her path to crime. She was often drawn to individuals who were themselves deeply entrenched in criminal activities. These relationships not only exposed her to criminal behavior, but they also normalized it. For Tiffany, crime was no longer something to avoid, but rather it became a part of her daily life. Financial struggles were also a significant factor. Tiffany often found herself in situations where she was desperate for money. As the pressure mounted, she turned to crime as a means of survival. It was a decision born out of desperation, but it was a decision nonetheless. Her struggles with mental health further complicated matters. Tiffany was grappling with her own personal demons, and her criminal activities served as a way for her to cope. It was an unhealthy coping mechanism, to say the least, but it was one that she clung to. As we look back at Tiffany's path to crime, we can't help but wonder, could things have turned out differently? Could different choices have led her down a different path? We may never know the answers to these questions. What we do know is that Tiffany was on a collision course with disaster. Little did she know these choices were leading her towards an unthinkable act. In July 2005, Tiffany Ann Cole would commit a crime that would shock the nation. The summer heat was just settling in when Tiffany, along with her accomplices, set in motion a plan of unimaginable horror. The target? A couple who had shown her nothing but kindness in the past. Their trust was repaid with a cold, calculated betrayal that would leave a permanent scar on the community. This was no spur-of-the-moment act of violence. It was a meticulously planned, cold-blooded crime. Tiffany and her co-conspirators dug a grave in the backyard of the unsuspecting couple's home. A grave that was soon to be filled, not with the remains of a beloved pet or a time capsule of youthful memories, but with the very people who had once extended their hand in friendship to Tiffany. The couple was lured into their own home, bound and gagged, and then callously buried alive. The air was thick with terror as the last shovel of dirt sealed their tragic fate. This was not just a crime, it was a monstrous act of inhumanity. The aftermath was just as chilling. With the couple missing, suspicion quickly turned towards Tiffany and her associates. The community was devastated, their sense of safety and trust shattered. The home, once a symbol of warmth and hospitality, now stood as a grim reminder of the horrifying act that had taken place. As the evidence piled up, the truth became impossible to ignore. Tiffany's actions were not those of a desperate individual pushed to their limits, but of a remorseless criminal. The sheer brutality of her actions sent ripples of shock and fear throughout the nation. In the wake of this chilling act, Tiffany would face the consequences of her actions. In the aftermath of the crime, Tiffany's life would change forever. The shocking revelations of her heinous act sent ripples through the community, the nation, and indeed the world. The investigation was swift, and the evidence against Tiffany was damning. Tiffany, once a young woman full of potential, found herself facing the stark reality of her actions in the cold, hard light of a courtroom. The trial was a media circus, with every twist and turn broadcast for all to see. The prosecution painted a picture of a ruthless criminal, while the defense sought to portray Tiffany as a victim of circumstance caught in a web of her own making. The jury listened, deliberated, and ultimately they made their decision. The gavel fell, and with it, Tiffany's fate was sealed. She was sentenced to death, a punishment that reflected the gravity of her crimes. The once vibrant young woman was now a shell of her former self, stripped of her freedom and facing the end of her life at an age when most are just beginning theirs. But the impact of Tiffany's crime reached far beyond her own life. The lives of the victims' families were irrevocably altered. They were left to grapple with the loss of their loved ones, a void that could never be filled. The community, too, was left reeling, struggling to understand how such a tragedy could occur in their midst. Tiffany's story serves as a chilling reminder of the dark depths to which human beings can descend when they stray from the path of righteousness. It's a testament to the devastating consequences of a life gone off the rails. It's a cautionary tale that underscores the importance of choices and the far-reaching impacts they can have. This is the chilling story of Tiffany Ann Cole, a testament to the devastating consequences of a life gone off the rails. Remember to like, share, and follow for more captivating true crime stories.